Welcome everyone to our stream. We're gonna really nerd out today. I wanted to jump into some geeking out on command structure and obedience. So what we're going to do specifically today is going to be building reward ratio schedules in the command structure. So you don't get too confused by what that means. I'm going to go over our objectives for today. One is we're going to do a quick review of what a command structure is. Then why we're going to learn, why we want to learn the first half of this command structure first. And really the big focus that we're going to work on today is the ratio schedules, is learning about ratio schedules in dog training, and then some other smaller components here. Like I'm going to briefly go over the use of the name in the dog, and also some things to consider depending on the type of training you're doing, such as competitive obedience versus real life obedience. There's some things that we definitely want to be aware of. So I have a lot to go over, but I like this subject. So let's get started. I think you'll find some of these things more interesting than it seems at first. All right. So this right here is our command structure right here. And you're going to see this a lot. And once we go on to get into the hands-on stuff with our clients, we want to teach them how to communicate with their dog. So just looking at this chart at first, it seems sort of daunting. There's like all these arrows all over the place, and it could get kind of confusing. But that's why we actually build it. All right. So you'll see these checklists around on the website. And what we do is we build the components, and we teach the clients how to understand the importance of each step and what they're supposed to do at each step. And when you break it down into little pieces, it's actually pretty easy, and it works really, really well. So when you see anything that I put out that has look like overwhelming situations, and with the protection dogs and people yelling, and especially clients that are handling two dogs at the same time, it's all about the command structure. The clients that understand how to speak to their dog with a complete command structure always handle the dogs the best way, have the best relationship. Things are very smooth. It incorporates everything into here. We want to have a complete dog training plan. For example, to jump down over here, you'll see this chart around the side. I call this the Dog Training Trinity, which means scientifically, if you want to get the most reliable obedience possible, what you really need to know is first is how to really master using reward-based training, technically, is what this is. Specifically, I would say the end result is really be good at using variable reward schedules, which we're going to learn about a component today. And PREMAC principle, which is basically a positive type of dog training, where we're just using situations and activities as rewards, instead of like some sort of stimulus, like something the dog eats or a toy that the dog gets. Actually activities. This is more than half of it. Like you don't really want, I don't like to go talk much about punishment unless someone is really good with this sort of stuff. And I always tell people that as a professional dog trainer, the best way to be good at incorporating punishment, and the most ethical way to incorporate punishment into a training plan, when and if you find it necessary, is to first be really, really, really good at using the encouragement side of things, the positive reinforcement and the negative punishment, which is just the given and taken away of things that the dog likes. If you really know how to maximize what you can do with that, you do get better results. It's not good. I'm all for punishment, but you never want to rely on it as the main part of your plan. It has its purposes. And remember, as professional dog trainers, we're most successful when clients have a great relationship with their dog and have fun during the training. So you start off the training like this and show them that they can get results. The times when they're going to use the punishment, they're gonna know when it's necessary and they're gonna be ready for it. And then it's not even so bad because the dog knows so much about what it's supposed to do. When we do the punishment, it's really used primarily as a correction to show them what to do and to put them right back on track to getting all the good things. So it's very minimal. I promise you that. I promise you that. Which brings us to our command structure over here. What I'm going to show you today is this command structure shows how to communicate with the dog and how to use both positive reinforcement in the training and negative punishment, the given and taken away of the things that the dog likes, and positive punishment and negative reinforcement, which is given and taken away aversive, things that the dog doesn't like. But when we start training with the dog, with the clients, I stay on this half. This half over here of the chart is all just reward-based training. So I'll give you an example. When we start training with the dogs, one of the first things that I teach people, and this is very easy, is just to say the dog's name before any type of interaction. Any type of interaction. And I keep it very simple. That's the first thing that they're going to do. The dog's name is just to start that you're connecting with the dog and something's about to happen. It could be anything. It could be you're going to play with the dog, you're going to feed the dog, you're going to do training. So I always started off with the name. And if you want to get scientific about it, what we're simply doing, if we want to talk like classical conditioning, is we're just conditioning the dog that the sound of their name from a person is going to be associated with a connection, an interaction. There's engagement. The person saying your name wants to engage. So you will see different things. Even in some of my old videos, you see some training exercises where someone's saying the dog's name and we're asking the dog to look at the face and stuff like that. In my opinion, the most important thing is just teach the dog when they hear their name that to pay attention to you, that something's going on, that something's about to go on. And it makes it very easy. And it works very smooth with the training. And I can do a whole video upon the importance of the name and why not using the name in real life training, where there's so much stuff going on, can cause a lot of unnecessary, what I call false disobedience, where the dog didn't mean to disobey, but they just didn't notice that you said something to them, or they thought you were talking to them and you were talking to someone else. I do have a link over here, but I'm going to do a video. I explain, in some text over here, but I will shoot a video on that. So, but very, very, very important. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about saying the dog's name and giving the dog a command. All right. Giving the dog a command. And we're only going to work on this. If the dog obeys, we're going to just work on what we're supposed to do in the beginning with a client. That's it. All right. What are we supposed to do? We're going to praise the dog. We're going to start getting used to reward schedules. And then we're going to move on to something else by saying the dog's name. Uh-oh. Sorry, guys. I switched over. I wasn't on the chart over here. This is what we're going to do. We're going to work on this half of the chart where we're going to say the dog's name, give the dog a command, where technically it's a request at this point. It's just a cue. Dog doesn't have to do anything. The dog obeys. If the dog does not obey, we don't worry about it, right? We don't work on that. You don't work on that with a client until they master this. If they don't obey, we just start over. That's all we do. We say their name, we ask them again. If for some reason they don't want to obey, we're talking about a different subject, establishing operations. Why is the dog not interested in the training, right? When the dog does obey, we're going to talk about marking, which is, I suggest, mostly use and praise, and then about the reward schedule. This is really the main focus of this lecture right over here. And then starting back from the beginning, saying the dog's name to issue another request. And we just keep going around inside of the circle. And it's on this chart right here. I updated our chart for 5.0 is right here, is ratio. It's ratio. So this chart is, if you, as a trainer, this is your quality control. If you teach your client all of these concepts, you're going to be on the right track. You gave them a real education and the dog an education. A lot of trainers, this is actually very common, especially when trainers are doing things like in kennel training. They may do a good job communicating a lot of things to the dog, but then it doesn't really pass over to the client, and that's where it really matters. So we do want to teach them the concept of the ratio, of using a ratio in the training. All right, so I'm going to go down here. Now, when we're talking about ratios, with the dogs, it's very specific definition. It's just how many repetitions of the behavior before they get reinforced, all right? Or how many times, we're talking to the clients, all right? The ratio is just going to be how many times your dog has to respond to your request before you give them their treat or love or a toy, whatever they enjoy, all right? So that part varies depending on what type of training that you're doing. Whoops, a little ate up. All right, now I'm going to go over the different types over here. I'm going to show you examples, all right? We're going to go over continuous reinforcement schedules, different types of partial, fixed, and variable. Now, we're going to go over that, and just like there's going to be some classical conditioning mixed in here, please, there are lectures. There's lectures on classical conditioning. Don't worry about the terminology. Worry about the concepts. If you understand the concepts and then you learn the terminology, it makes it easy to understand. As a professional dog trainer, I'm speaking the truth here through experience. You can be very good at training dogs, and you can actually be very successful teaching clients. There's lots of proof out there without nerding out on the terminology. But you need to know the concepts, all right? You need to know the concepts in order to be successful training the dog, teaching the people. The terminology, you need to learn the terminology if you want to be at the highest level, in my opinion. The reason why is because if you want to research what other trainers are doing, or even other people research in animals or psychology in general, if you don't understand the terminology, you cannot speak the language to gather all this additional information and to see the newest research and stuff like that. And of course, if you want to go on to teaching and teaching other people and things like that, learn the terminology. But you're going to say you don't need to know the terminology for this particular lecture. So first thing I'm going to just go over here is just the marker. All right. We're using a marker here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you that I have these charts over here. And what we're going to talk about is we're training with the client, the behavior. This is when the animal does the behavior that's requested. I just put numbers 1 through 6. If an animal does a behavior 6 times, what should we have the clients do? Next over here, I have the marker. All right. The marker, you can nerd out on classical conditioning later, right? But the marker is basically a conditioned reinforcer. If we're talking about Pavlov, or you also hear it called the secondary, reinforcer, right? You're going to hear different things for it. Marker, by far, it's easiest just to call it a marker with the client, and we let them know we're marking We're marking when the dog does the right thing. We let the dog know when the dog does the right thing. So the first thing that I have over here is what's called a continuous. This is a continuous reinforcement schedule. So what this chart shows, and we'll show you a little video. I actually shot Judy in the yard with Orfeo, is what the continuous reinforcement schedule is this is proven. All right, this is proven. Animals learn best when they are reinforced every time they do something new that you want to encourage. So we want to make sure we let the client know that. We need to let the client know that you're not going to be going through bags and bags of treats for the rest of your life, or throwing a ball around every single time the dog does something, whatever you're using for the reinforcer. We let them know that this is temporary but important, and it works to get the behaviors the fastest. Now, what we have over here is continuous reinforcement is when the dog does something right, we let him know. In this case, we say good boy, and then Orfeo's going to get a reward. He's going to get a treat. Every single time. It does not matter what you're teaching the dog. Anything that's new, this is how you teach it. Here's really, really quick video just to show you a concept.
Orfeo, come. Good boy. Good boy. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Orfeo, down. Good boy. Orfeo, free. Good boy.
All right.
Good boy.
Nice and easy. Shows again. Now,
Orfeo, come. Good boy. Orfeo,
with these, notice too that Judy's saying the name
good
before every time she changes what she expects him to do.
boy. Orfeo, free. Good boy.
All right.
Boy.
So easy. All right. So this is very easy. These are kind of things I like clients to do immediately. All right. Immediately with the behaviors that they're working on with their dog. We get them used to saying the dog's name, because you can even see in the beginning of the video, right? He's over on the other side of the yard. All right. How does he know that she's not talking to me or talking to herself or something like that? We say the name. All right. We get the clients used to saying the dog's name to connect to the dog. I recommend with pet dogs and working dogs to use what I call a natural marker. All right. This is opinion. All right. This is opinion. So you can do what you want as a trainer. I notice that if we just teach them to get in the concept of saying good boy or good girl or whatever comes most naturally to them, it is easier for them and any family members to stay on the same page, because it's like they're naturally talking to their dog. And when you get doing things like personal protection and stuff like that, when we get into those high charged environments too, again, it's much easier for the client to remember to say good boy when the dog is coming over, good girl or something like that, than to say something like yes, or use a clicker or something. Okay. So clickers, saying yes, things like that, they work as markers. But if you understand why we use markers, it'll help you to know, choose which one's going to be the best for your situation. Because right down here, watch this, we're moving down to what we call a fixed ratio schedule. A fixed ratio schedule is when fixed means it's predictable now. All right. The ratio is just the amount of time. This is continuous. All right. This is a continuous every single time. Fixed means that it's predictable how often the dog is going to get a reward. But it's, it's going to be predictable how often they get the reward, and you can make it like every other time, every third time. It just has to be predictable. It's just not every time. I mean, technically a continuous reward schedule is a fix. A fixed is any time it's predictable. On this chart right here, what I have is, watch this. is I suggest, because the marker is technically a reward. People don't talk about this, all right, when we get into the classical conditioning. For pet dogs, I always suggest to let the dog know when it does something right every time, and to keep the marker on a continuous reinforcement schedule. This works really, really well, in my opinion, and a lot of other trainers' opinion, for real life, and because it's doable. It is definitely doable. But here we have the reward is on a fixed, which we call an abbreviation, if you want to get scientific, FR2, fixed ratio. Every second time the animal does the right behavior, it gets it. All right, it ends up getting the reward. So one example of what that would look like, and I'm going to tell you why I'm not in too much into the fixed ratio schedules in a moment, but I'll show a short clip just to show you what it looks like. If this plays, there we go.
Climb. Good boy.
So he didn't get one there, but he got praise. He got one for going down.
Sit. Good boy.
He doesn't get one there.
Come. Good boy.
Gets one there.
Good boy. Down. Good boy.
Nothing there.
Climb. Good boy.
And he gets one there. Okay. So I'll tell you what I find, the only use I really find for this in dog training. I like really simple fixed ratio schedule, maybe really early on with the client, where I'm just giving them something easy to get used to, not giving the treat every time. And I generally don't go over what we see here, like an FR2 or maybe an FR3. So if we're teaching a dog to heel and they're walking around and I'm telling them, okay, you're walking with the dog, give them a treat every second, good boy. So they're walking with the dog, good boy, treat, good boy, treat. Or they're doing an exercise like this. It's good because, and don't tell the client we're doing an FR2 schedule, all right? You want to make sure you're teaching them concepts. So like, okay, we want to see if your dog will still work, even if it's not getting a treat every single time. The reason why you don't want to go crazy with fixed ratio schedules is it's proven, and you can see it for yourself, is one, you cannot go very high on fixed ratio schedules without the dogs getting sort of slick and knowing, oh, I just did something and I got a treat. And if you're doing something like FR4, they know, oh, I'm not going to get a treat again until I do the fourth one. And you can see their kind of enthusiasm like go down. You get kind of weird, you'll get weird behaviors where they usually do really good right before they get it, and then you get a dip in performance right afterwards, and they work better before. And that's something that's just proven in science, which is why you don't see too much with fixed ratio schedules in dog training. Now, what I'm gonna show you instead is variable ratio schedules. So variable ratio schedules are when they do not get the reward every time, all right, except for it's not predictable, all right? So here, is examples of fixed ratios where it's predictable, all right? That's an FR3. But now, this is what I suggest, all right? A variable reward means that they're not going to get a reward every single time, but it is unpredictable. They cannot predict it. And the way in science that they normally write variable reward schedules is they usually write them similar to what you see here, like an FR3. Like, I didn't even write it here, like a VR3 would be that they would get the reward on average every 3 times. But in dog training, I found that it's better to do what's called a dense reward schedule. Dense reward schedules mean that the dog is going to get the reward most of the time, but not every time. It's the best way to get them used to not getting a reward most of the time. And that's kind of hard to write in technical terms because they're getting it, it just doesn't work out, that you have to do a fraction over here. So I suggest for training records, please keep training records, keep it simple, like do it the way that they do in math. Is just use regular ratios. Like for instance, right over here, if I'm asking a dog to do something 6 times, and on average they're going to get something 4 times, which is more than half. You could write in your training records, oh, I'm on a 6-to-4 ratio. For every 6 behaviors, they get 4 rewards. Or you can estimate it down, all right? If you know just about, that comes down to about a 3-to-2 for your records. It's much easier, in my opinion, all right? Or just write it out. Your trainer, like this stuff, just write it out, all right? I'm on a dense schedule. And you want to have an idea. So over here, what you see is still, we're marking every time so the dog knows it's doing right, but the reward is random, but the dog is mostly going to get it, all right, like we see over here. So I suggest we start off with the continuous with the clients, then you make sure that you can tell them right every other time, or even before with certain, you could say every other time, which would be, I would consider an even. That's even more than a dense. But I usually just tell them, don't give it to them like 1 out of 3 times. All right, like is what you see here.
Boy. Good boy.
So no reward there.
Or fail. Down.
He doesn't do it. There's no pun, right? Wait till he does it. He got it there.
Sit. Good boy.
He got it there. That's 2 out of 3 times.
Good boy.
Nothing
Or
there.
fail. Sit. Good.
There.
Or fail. Climb.
Got it like 3 out of
Good
5
boy.
times. What do you got? Like 4 out of 6 times there. All right.
Good boy. That's okay. That's okay. Good boy.
All right, so that's an example of a dense. All right, then this is in when you do a dense variable word schedule. See, then you can do. This is actually the same video I just used because this was a fixed ratio every other time. But technically, this is very similar to what I would call an even schedule too. If you just make it random, we ask the dog to do 6 things. On average, they're getting a reward 3 times, but you're going to see it's going to be random. You could do 2 over here, skip a couple, then give them 1 over here, then you skip and go across, all right? And you could do these charts. I put 6 behaviors here, but you could do these charts however you want. And even we're just showing that it's gradual. You go from a dense to an even, and then the thin, all right? This is what we're shooting for. I'm going to zip back up over here. All right. When I'm training, I want to see that a client understands the concept of getting to the thinnest ratio possible with their dogs where they can still get enthusiasm from their dog. So watch over here. Let's go down to the thin ratio over here. All right, thin variable schedule. So here we have a much thinner. He's going to get rewards less than when he does not get rewards. But because he did not go right to this, he does not really get frustrated, and he keeps a good level of enthusiasm, and the dog will be able to work longer without getting full from treats. And you could do longer training sessions, and it becomes just more useful in real life. So let's watch this little clip.
Come. Good boy. Or fail. Sit. Good boy. Or fail. Down. Good boy. Or fail. Climb. Good boy. Good boy.
Okay, so this is a thin schedule.
Orfeo, climb. Good boy. Orfeo, down. Good boy. Are you too big? Orfeo, sit.
Okay,
Good
good.
boy.
Yeah, and this clip's a little longer, so I don't have to watch the whole thing. But you get the idea. You can use the same amount of treats, usually get a longer training session, and it starts to become more useful to the clients right away, especially if they do obedience on the fly inside of the home, right? This is beginner stuff that you teach the owners with their dogs, all right? Of course, right, we have to incorporate teaching the dogs, what these different commands are, different behaviors are, which is separate. We could do a lecture on creating the behaviors itself, but this is a constant, right? This is a constant to do things like this. And then it's a concept that the owners learn. All right. Now, so you can also see that now you can have the clients have some fun with their dogs and even incorporate it into the play. All right. So here's, I don't have to play the whole thing, but
Boy.
now they can practice the obedience during the play.
Down. Good boy. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Orfeo, go get it.
Right.
Yay, buddy. Good boy. Good boy.
Of course, you could do this in your lessons too
Whoa.
with the clients.
Orfeo, come here.
Big goofball.
Orfeo, out. Good boy. Orfeo, down. Good boy. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Orfeo, go get it.
Okay, so lots of fun with Orfeo.
Like it's
Then you could
fall.
just
Orfeo, out. Good boy. Orfeo, okay. Good boy.
all right, big goofball. All right, so but notice here now. So notice what we were really doing over here, right? So look at the thin schedule, what we have over here, right? So it's we have behaviors. We always do the markers, and then you start thinning out the rewards. And the rewards, I mean, everything here, like I say, learn how to build your own training plans, right? Markers don't have to be praise. They could be clickers for your situation. It could be the word yes for your situation. The rewards could be treats. It could be your affection. It could be toys. It could be whatever is motivating the dog for, at that particular time. All right. Okay. Let's see. What are you guys talking about over here? Okay. Nothing. All right. Now, next, alternative considerations that I want to talk about things like competitive obedience. So I'll tell you a story. Like this was kind of recently. I had a good friend of mine, write me not that long ago saying that their son, was really getting, more into the dog training and was, doing more professional dog training. And he sent his son away to someone who was at the top of the field in competitive training. And son went away for a couple of weeks, gave this trainer $20,000 to teach him how to train. And then he came back to train, not to compete with dogs, but to train pet dogs. All right. So then he sent me a video of his son training, and I see his son training in such a way with a pet dog for a client that would be great if you were preparing a dog for competition. All right. But not so great if you're trying to teach this dog concepts and the owner concepts where they could communicate with each other, right? So I didn't say anything. I don't want to say like, oh, that was, you spent $20,000 for that. Instead I was like, oh, here's some other videos he might find helpful. All right, give him some information for free, right? Because if you mimic, all right, I want people to learn not to mimic, all right? Like if someone mimicking could be good, right? If you know exactly what you want to do and you mimic someone who's also doing exactly what you want to do and it worked for them, then mimicking could be good. And in a lot of ways you are teaching clients, right, to mimic you. Like you'll often know what they need. You make the plan, and then they have, then you have them mimic what you're doing, right? But as a professional, you'll be most successful if you learn to create and you learn to understand. So start thinking of things in like charts. So I'll give you an example. I found a pretty cool example, and because I've done this before, I competed in AKC obedience before. I'll show you a really short clip. You could watch the whole one. You'll get an idea of what the goal is and if someone's competing, right? So if someone's doing competitive obedience, which is fine. Competitive obedience is lots of fun, and people have fun. And I know trainers. I'm definitely not saying competition is bad. I know trainers that do compete with their dogs and train pet dogs, and they train the dogs completely different ways, and they know the difference. And these are usually trainers that they do not mimic, all right? Like they're into studying and learning the behavior and knowing the concepts, and they know it's going to be successful for each type of environment. But if you watch here, let's just watch a little bit of something from AKC. I like this one because you could hear the judge. Is what you're going to notice is in obedience, competitive obedience, you're not allowed to talk to your dog, right? You're not allowed to praise your dog if they do the right thing. You're not allowed to pet your dog. You're not allowed to give the dog rewards. There's not a lot of things that you're allowed to do. Or else you get points off, and in some cases, you get disqualified. All right? So when you see a routine like this in just like a plain blank area over here with nothing going on, this is a lot of work for this handler to get the dog to even do what's called like, this is just like a novice trial, because they're not allowed to. If you look over here, I'm showing you, they're not allowed to use markers or rewards in the interaction of the ring when they trial. So typically what you see them doing, and if you train this way, you'll find yourself, it'll make sense, is you start using, because you can't use markers, you can't click, you can't say yes, you can't praise the dog, that they're going to put the markers, they're going to thin out not only the actual reward, they're going to have to thin out the markers too. And this is also why a lot of competitive trainers do use clicks and stuff like that with their dogs, and the word yes, because it's more technical, right? They're not really showing emotion inside of the training ring so much. So this all has to end up getting thinned out. So what you basically have is, depending on the amount of exercises the dog has to do and the amount of time, it all comes down to the dog is usually expecting you get this dog to do all of this in hopes of getting one reward at the end, which during competition day, they don't even get that inside of the ring. And that's why you do a lot of training and prep for the dog to usually do it once. And then you have to get the dog ready and prepare them and reward them more during the actual, during the routine, to prepare them for a very thin schedule at the end. It's a lot of thought, all right? It's a lot of thought, and it's not as easy as people think to do obedience. But I'm showing you this because you don't have to do, you don't necessarily want to train. Make sure you're not training the same way for this as you're training for the person, all right? You want the person to enjoy the training. In everyday life, you're allowed to tell your dog good boy all you want. You're going to see the same thing when we get into things like the punishment side of things, where we're allowed to tell our dog no in real life and not have to actually punish the dog, communicate with the dog and stuff like that. You can't do that here, all right? The same way here, all right, this is a dog, very highly trained dog that I think was for sale or something. And the obedience is being demonstrated here. And again, you can see this one was IPO protection, highly titled dog. You have to think now, how is this dog trained? And if this dog is going to be sold to a person as a pet, what does the dog have to relearn? And what do we have to reteach the owner? There's two things I want you to notice here. All right. One is the absence of the name, because you're not allowed to say the dog's name in competition unless, depending on the sport, I mean, it depends on the sport, if the name becomes is joined with the command, all right? Like Rex sit instead of Rex to get their attention, sit, Rex down. So then it doesn't really work as well to get their attention. And remember, in competition, they don't really need to get the dog's attention because you're always usually placed mostly by yourself with the dog in an open area. You're not talking to anyone else. You're not talking to more than one dog. There's usually not a lot of chaos going on. Right? There's exceptions with some of the more hardcore protection sports and stuff like that. But you can see that there will be potential limitations. Not that this is bad. Like I say, competition is fun. But as a professional dog trainer, you need to know the difference, but you want to understand. Don't mimic, understand how it's different, all right? Let's just watch a little clip here. So it's just commands, no name. No markers, no rewards. But the dog's doing it, all right? And the dog looks pretty happy. But why? We could explain it.
Sit. Here, sit. Here. What? What?
All right, we get the idea here. And the dog does good. Dog goes for a pretty long period of time. I mean, they cut it out and do different things, but then at the end, you get an idea why the dog is doing it. All right, we pull out a ball over here, and the dog's pretty happy. So.
Here.
So now we got a ball out.
Good.
And then the dog eventually gets it.
Yes.
All right. So what we essentially have here is, again, is a dog, no name in the command structure, and doing a lot of things for reward at the end. And this is very, very common with, as far as how communication goes with a lot of dogs in sport work. Now, why you have to be aware of this too training pet dogs is this obviously works really good if you have a dog that's in a situation that really, really wants what you have enough to do lots of behaviors, knows that they're likely going to get it, and the trainer has taken the time to work to such a thin schedule that the dog will wait to the end. But you're not going to keep that enthusiasm unless you do that routine over and over, and the dog will also sometimes randomly get it in the middle of the routine, in the beginning of the routine, all right? So it's a lot of work to get the dog to present well, and you could see the obvious limitations that we could have when it comes to working with a client and their pet dog and these families with the parent that has all the kids, they're taking to school and the dog's over here, and they want to, you want to have more communication, the better. The markers, the praise, them understanding the reward schedule and what they can expect at each stage during the training. The other last thing that I want to talk about here is, and then I'll just kind of show you some more of the stuff in action, is also, I'm kind of coming back to this. In an earlier lecture, I talked about, we had Bob Bailey in there, which I'm so impressed by everything that he accomplished. And it's not the thin variable ratio is not really the end all for all of your training jobs, all right? Just because that works really well to get the dogs to work longer, it does not mean that it is always the best. For example, Bob Bailey, if we remember, he was doing different projects for the government, and he was also doing shows, for example, where he would have what was it called, like the IQ Zoo, where they would train different animals, and then people would set them up, trainers would set them up like at different amusement parks or whatever, and the animals would usually do one activity per show. All right. Certain things you will see, like I say, you have to play around with the training. You want to study the reward schedules. Certain things are just best if they're rewarded every single time and will make sense. So suppose you have a dog that has to do this one behavior like once every single day, predictably, like at the IQ Zoo. A pig may 3 times a day come out of a chute, come out and like grab like a big wooden coin and like put it in a piggy bank, right? Then they would go back to where they came from and there was a reward waiting for them. In those cases, if the pig was doing it 3 times a day, they just rewarded the pig every single time, and they got really good results. Where certain things, especially low frequency behaviors, where especially they're extended during long time periods, where there's low risk of the animal getting satiated, meaning like full from food, stuff like that. Sometimes that is the best and most reliable option. Where if you try to thin something like that out and the pig comes out in the morning and gets something for it and then does the show in the afternoon and there's nothing there could be a risk that it may not be as then enthusiastic, right? In the evening when it does the same show. So you can come up with your own examples for for your clients. Sometimes it can be in the morning. I'll give you an example. Like the morning, if me or Judy are going to work, depending who took out the dogs last in the morning, they always eat breakfast after they come in from the yard, after they go to the bathroom. One of the reasons why is I know if those dogs know 100% when we open the door and call them in, they're getting their breakfast. I don't have to worry about whether or not they decide they don't want to come in that morning and me be late for work. It's very, very reliable, but this isn't something we're doing a million times a day, all right? So the reward schedules are, you pay attention to it, all right? So to close it off, we'll show you, because we just to show how this is piece of something, all right? You could watch, I'm not going to show these whole videos. You could see it on your own. This just gives you a start. We still have to talk about things like interval. That's time now. Getting the dog to do to actually be while they're doing the behavior, how often they can get rewarded, while they're doing the behavior. It's the amount of time, how often will rewards be available. We are going to learn about that, which is really good for making better durations, which we also teach, is having the animals do things consistently for a longer period of time. Duration just talks about how long an animal is expected to do something. The interval is the reward schedule, that deals with the time. And these are two different concepts, very important. So we are gonna learn about those in upcoming lectures, and we have to know about that before we go to here. But like you can see, this is Orfeo. We got some video of him like 5 years ago, and some other dogs. And then it's like, can you pick out? It's probably gonna get loud. Protection training. Let me make this bigger here. It's, can you pick out one little piece, the little piece of the reward schedules that we have done, all right? And the importance of. So in these cases, right, we have clients doing high-level stuff. This is personal protection. The name makes it easier for the dog to know, right? When she's talking to him, this is Boone, compared to talking to these weird people over here, right? This is Josh and this is Carlos. They're both trainers. And then the reward for this dog is, protection dogs usually enjoy biting. All right, but when she calls him, you see these markers. Whenever she does, even in these crazy situations, whenever these handlers have the dogs do something, they're allowed to praise. And the praise lets the dog know, even the dog cannot get a goodie in this situation, has a muzzle on, probably doesn't want to take it, cannot bite again, cannot get a toy. It lets the dog know, oh, you just did right. And it prevents the dog from second guessing themselves when they're in these crazy situations over here. All right. So now she can control this dog. She can talk to the dog. And this is a different dog. The same thing. Watch these videos. I say we're not going to play these. These are in the notes. And pick out the part that pick out the parts that we learned today. Oh, we got Orfeo. You want to see Orfeo 5 years ago? So he was doing basic stuff, but this is all of this turns into more.
Good buddy. Good boy.
He stays.
It's easy to stay.
You go, he stays.
Carlos is coming with
It's easy
me.
to
No,
stay.
stay in that chair. If you want your knees, stay in that chair.
So he got his good boy out in the hallway. So he knows he's doing the right thing.
Stay in the chair.
Carlos,
She's nicer.
come with
Yeah, that's the whole point. You want your knees?
me. Good boy. No. Good boy.
What was that?
All right. Those good boys are markers.
When he gets around, you're yelling.
Swinging what?
I said-
Nervous?
Yeah, I
It's
am.
my job. You better be nervous. It's my job.
I think he swung that once. I saw it.
He did.
Get back down or you'll lose your knees.
Whoa! Well, they're down here though.
Yeah. I can go
And then
back
as we
down.
bite,
Now.
let's zoom it up here.
Orfeo, come. Good boy. I told you I'm not leaving with that. Orfeo, come. Good boy. Orfeo, sit. Good boy. Come on, Carlos.
You hear all the good boys after every command, all right? So that's that piece that you need even when we incorporate into higher things. So we have to thin out the reward schedule, and the reward schedule depends on the situation, but you do want these dogs to understand that they did the right thing.
Out of here.
Let's see, we'll probably get more praise here.
Leave.
We
Hey, dog.
are.
You're not too tough.
Good boy. Come with me. Come on. Good boy.
Good to have
Carlos,
another
come
guy
on.
because they look at him
Walk
like,
on my right side.
who are you?
Good.
Well,
So-
well. Anybody
So it's
with
just
that
to show you in real life with real situations, you're allowed to praise the dogs. The clients are allowed to praise the dogs, but they need to get to a point where they know how to thin out the reward schedules, and it has to make sense to them. All right, so I'm gonna end this here. If there's any questions, I'm gonna scan to see if there's any questions that I missed over here. Make sure I hit my objectives, and then we'll close this out. Yeah, it looks like we hit everything that I wanted to hit today. Arthur says the personal protection vids are Academy Award quality. We had so much fun. And this is my honestly, if I had all the time in the world, I would make my own competition where people were allowed to handle the dogs exactly how they would handle them in real life, including whatever training equipment they had on. And they basically would get scored on things like that. Like when you are doing all the communication possible and you're handling the dog how you do in real life, yeah, take points off if you have to physically punish your dog. You know, if the dog doesn't, like, take off all these points, but allow the handlers to talk to the dogs like they do in real life. This way, that was always something that was something that prevented me from doing more things like competition. It's really fun, but when you only have so much time in the day to train with your dog or a client's dog, I like to focus on what's going to help them in real life and their relationship and things like that and being successful. Where if you talk, and I've apprenticed under one like world champion in both AKs, both in like obedience, like a US AKC champion and the world champion competing in IPO work. And his competition dogs, he admitted they were not, he couldn't handle them as pets. They spent more times in kennels, more times in crates. He did less stuff with them because he didn't want to like undo his prep that he was basically doing to compete with the dog. You do different things. You do different things with the dogs. All right. So, and there's obviously, like I said, there's obviously people that can pull off both, especially if they don't care about focusing just on one thing and being absolutely the best on one thing. They can pull off both, but you can't even begin to go there if you don't understand the very basics of ratios. But I've done it before. For a client, I competed in AKC for the client dog, and I made sure, that I did what I had to prep the dog for competition, but it was more money and time because I had to prepare the dog to also easily understand what it needed to know to go back into real life and coach the owner that, yeah, there's all this communication and stuff like that you got to do with the dog. So you can do it. All right, I'm going to close this one off, and I'll stay around in the chat after I close it off just to see if there's any questions about this one. Thanks for coming, and I'll be back for live Q&A on